Welcome to Kings and Chronicles, a sanctuary where the echoes of medieval legend and the struggles of kings come alive through immersive stories and compassionately crafted tales. Here, we journey through the shadows and triumphs that shaped Europe's heart. If you find meaning in these stories, please like and subscribe. Your support keeps these remarkable histories breathing and helps our chronicles unfold for everyone who seeks to understand the past. In this story, we follow Edward the Confessor, the last Anglo-Saxon king of England, whose holy reputation and turbulent reign laid the path for an epic turning point in English history. Through calm storytelling, we will uncover Edward's life, his battles with rival nobles, and the unforeseen crisis that led to the Norman conquest of 1066. Settle in as we embark on a reflective journey through a kingdom longing for peace. Chapter 1. England at the Crossroads. The early 11th century was an age restless with uncertainty, as the winds of change swept across England's green fields and weather-beaten shores. Viking longships prowled the coasts, their sails haunting English villages from Kent to York. Inside, England was marked by power struggles, uneasy alliances, and the ambitions of nobles jostling for dominance. This turmoil set the stage for a new life-form destined for greatness. An expectant hush lay over the land, for each invasion left scars and anxieties in its wake, plundering cities, scattering families, and burdening townsfolk with fresh hopes for deliverance. Amidst this tension, kings and queens worked tirelessly, sometimes ruthlessly, to secure their fragile thrones. The court's loyalty could shift like the North Sea tides, and one misstep might invite disaster. Into this world of uncertainty, a royal child was about to enter. This child would be known as Edward, born of noble blood and carrying with him the weight of legacy. His father, King Thelred, wore the crown during troubled times, forever haunted by both betrayal and his own difficult rule. Edward's mother, Emma of Normandy, linked the royal house to the great duchy across the Channel, an alliance locking England into international intrigue. Edward's birth was both a symbol of unity and a new beginning. Long before Edward ever spoke his first word, his destiny was shaped by the actions and alliances of those who came before him. His family tree was filled with kings and queens who struggled to secure peace, yet often fueled conflict instead. Some dreamed of a strong, united kingdom free from outside threats. Others schemed in the silent corridors of castles, hoping to bend the course of history for their gain. Edward's future would not be easy. The very air of England crackled with tension as the young prince entered the world, a land of shifting loyalties, where neighbours watched each other warily, and feasts could quickly turn into quarrels. Ancient traditions guided every choice, yet new dangers forced the crown to adapt. Even as he lay in his mother's arms, Edward was a living emblem of hope for some, and uncertainty for many others. His journey was both personal and political. England's royal court was a complex world, grand halls filled with flickering torchlight, echoing with the footsteps of advisers, priests, and warriors. Every gesture was studied and every rumour had weight. Edward's father, King Thelred, often found himself surrounded by counsellors whose loyalty was as unpredictable as the seas that battered England's shores. In this unpredictable world, a king could have power one day and stand alone the next. Outside these gilded walls, ordinary people worked the land and braved harsh winters, their lives woven into the greater story of England's fate. They listened intently to word of royal births and looming threats, for these events shaped taxes, safety, and the rhythm of daily life. All the while, England's enemies watched for weakness. The fate of the kingdom rested on both the courage of the people and the vision of its rulers. Edward's mother, Emma, was a force as formidable as any king. A daughter of Normandy, she brought her own customs, language, and advisers to England. Her marriage was not simply a union of two people, but a strategic alliance that redefined England's place in the world. While she sought to anchor her family's rule, she also navigated jealousies at court. Emma's influence would profoundly shape Edward's understanding of leadership, resilience, and faith. From his earliest days, Edward was surrounded by reminders of both faith and fear. Candlelit chapels whispered with prayers for deliverance words that mingled with tales of saints and martyrs. In the stillness of midnight, the distant cry of a sentry could break the peace, a sign that danger always lurked beyond the castle walls. Amid all this, The young prince grew up with a sense that the divine and the mortal were inseparable in English life. The countryside beyond the walls was alive with stories. Legends of giants, miracles, and ancient kings flowed from hearth to hearth. For the English people, hope was found as much in these tales as in their sovereign's promises. It was in this landscape marked by hardship and heroism that Edward the Confessor began to form his sense of duty. Each day became a lesson, as faith, heritage, and the lessons of hardship shaped him. In these formative years, rumblings of discord haunted every celebration and council. Noblemen held private feasts in their dark halls, whispering alliances by candlelight. Some eyed the throne with hungry ambition, while others clung to decades-old feuds. Edward's sense of justice and mercy began not in distant glory, but in observing these struggles firsthand, the push and pull of power among those he was meant to one day lead. Yet, amid constant threat and shifting allegiances, a deeper hope lived in the hearts of many. Folk prayers for peace rose from tiny chapels, a desire for an end to raids and bloodshed. Edward's very name, meaning guardian of prosperity, hinted at the dreams resting on his young shoulders. In the quiet spaces between conflict, the glow of possibility flickered, waiting for a leader worthy of the challenge. The stage was now set for a new chapter. The halls in which Edward grew echoed with the interplay of strength and vulnerability. Tapestries told stories of past kings and battles won, yet the whispers in corners reminded the young prince of betrayals suffered and friends lost to shifting fortunes. Every lesson his tutors taught, every glance cast by his family, shaped his impressions of what it meant to be a ruler. Even as a child, Edward was learning to bear his people's dreams and burdens. The burden of lineage can be a double-edged sword. For Edward, descended from kings on both Anglo-Saxon and Norman sides, every expectation was magnified. His future would be judged by the peace or turmoil he could bring to England. As invasions and internal strife continued, a profound question lingered in the minds of all. Could young Edward, innocent and untested, grow into the leader the realm so desperately needed? These doubts shadowed his earliest years. Not everything in Edward's childhood was weighed down by war or ceremony. In rare moments of laughter and learning, he and his siblings played among the castle corridors, chased by the scent of cooking fires and the laughter of servants. Yet even these joys were fleeting, as the world outside their walls pressed ever closer. To be royal in England meant that happiness was always tainted with anxieties over the future and the past. Around the young prince, trusted advisers watched for opportunity and danger alike. In the flicker of lamplight, priests murmured prayers for wisdom. Warriors sharpened swords against unseen foes, and mothers whispered hope for peace. Edward grew up watching, listening, and learning, absorbing every lesson fear and faith could offer. In this delicate balance, he began to see his life not as his own, but as England's. Hope its last best prayer for salvation. With each passing year, the shadow of the Viking threat lengthened. Fleets still raided the coastline, and whole villages were sometimes left in ruins. The royal family moved between strongholds, seeking safety while projecting strength. Edward, shaped by these journeys, understood deeply the cost of both war and peace. As he watched his parents navigate court intrigue, he learned that trust and courage, the currency of kings, were in constant, desperate supply. England's hopes did not rest only on the nobility, but also on the faith of its people. In smoky chapels and open fields, prayers rose for a wiser king and calmer days. The clergy taught that suffering had meaning, and that every trial prepared the nation for God's deliverance. In these lessons, Edward found both comfort and calling. The destiny awaiting him would ask for a leader not only skilled in statecraft, but guided by gentleness and conviction. Peace, for Edward and his people, seemed both achingly close and heartbreakingly distant. Some days brought the promise of Treaty Southers, a new threat on the horizon. Each triumph was shadowed by the memory of defeat, every promise threatened by betrayal. Yet through all, Edward's presence became a quiet reassurance, a reminder that the story of England was not destined for endless darkness. Among candles and courtiers, his path began to take shape. Edward's journey would soon leave the sheltered walls of childhood. Kingdoms are forged not by comfort, but by Triland England, battered yet unbroken, waited restlessly for a leader of vision. Every night, as fires glowed in the hearths and sentries watched the horizon, the nation wondered, would this prince fulfill the hopes placed upon him? The heartbeat of the kingdom grew tense as the shadow of the unknown loomed ever closer. As Edward came of age, the tides of England's fate grew only more turbulent. The fragile peace his birth had symbolized seemed always at risk from fresh invasions, from rivalry among the powerful, and from the ever-changing ambitions within his family. Yet through these uncertainties, Edward's own journey was quietly beginning, shaped and strengthened by every hardship. The story of his life was poised on the edge of transformation, waiting for history to claim him. In the dim light of dawn that marked the beginning of a new era, England stood at a crossroads. The old world, battered by conflict and longing for peace, looked to Edward as both a promise and a question. His path would test not only his faith and wisdom, but also the spirit of a nation weary of bloodshed. With hope mingled with fear, England watched and waited as the next chapter in its story drew near. Chapter 2. The Exile Prince, Edward's story, enters its quieter, lonelier years as Norman winds sweep away his familiar world. Taken from his homeland after the Danish conquest, young Edward finds himself an outcast in a foreign court. These formative days, marked by displacement, would leave a lasting mark on his heart and plant the first seeds of the faith for which he'd be remembered forever. In the shadows of Normandy's stone halls, Edward wanders with the restlessness of a boy who remembers green English fields but can no longer walk them. His mother, Emma, clings to hope for her son's future, whispering tales of England to remind him of his royal heritage. Exile weighs heavily, shaping Edward's gentle nature and cultivating the patience that would later define his kingship. Loneliness becomes Edward's constant companion, broken only by the rituals of prayer and the flicker of candlelight in Norman chapels. Here, the atmosphere is perfumed with incense, and the chants echo with promises of peace. Cut from the familiar world of Anglo-Saxon courts, he looks inward, drawing strength from faith as he learns to navigate uncertainty among courtly strangers. Although in exile, Edward is not forgotten. Norman lords observe the quiet, contemplative English prince, unsure whether he is merely a shadow of former royalty or something more profound. The continental culture of Normandy, steeped in Latin, law and liturgy, seeps into his bones, shaping his mind and heart in ways he would never foresee once fate returned him to England's shores. The young Edward listens to tales of saints and martyrs with a rapt devotion that surprises his hosts. Their stories inspire him, providing a refuge from the ache of loss and the uncertainty of exile. Over time, these tales of faith and sacrifice slip into his dreams, gently guiding him toward the resolve and spiritual calling he would later embody as the Confessor. Emma, Edward's mother, is ever watchful. In the lamplight, she teaches him the old prayers of her homeland and speaks in hushed tones of duty and destiny. Though her heart aches for England, she reminds Edward of the virtues that mark a true king: mercy, humility, and faith. These quiet instructions, given far from home, shape the foundations of Edward's future character. As years slip by in Normandy, the exile prince grows apart from his brothers and the old ties of his father's house. Childhood friendships fade, replaced by the formalities of a court that is not quite his own. Edward finds solace in books and church, learning the discipline of silent endurance that will serve him well in the turbulence of royal life ahead. Normandy's monasteries become Edward's haven. Within their stone walls, he discovers a sanctuary of peace and learning. The monks, sensing his quiet devotion, nurture his budding piety. Each candlelit vigil and Latin chant draws Edward closer to a vision of kingship rooted in spiritual strength, far removed from the clamour and rivalry of worldly courts. Edward's exile is not only a punishment, but a strange kind of preparation. Cut off from the ambitions and feuds that rule England, he learns detachment from worldly power. Instead, he strengthens his soul with prayer, reflection, and study. Even though life often feels lonely, these trials cultivate the gentleness and resilience that would one day shape his rule. News from England reaches Normandy as faint echoes reports of shifting thrones, the rise and fall of kings, noble unrest. Each rumour is a reminder to Edward that his true home slips further from his grasp. Still, in the silence of Norman nights, he holds on to hope, imagining a day when he may return and whether he will be ready for that momentous call. Continental customs leave a subtle mark on Edward's heart. He comes to admire the orderliness of Norman justice and the devotion with which the people honour local saints. These experiences expand his sense of what a ruler could be, planting ideas that would one day bring him into quiet conflict with the old traditions and nobility when his past and destiny finally converge. Emma's ambitions for her son remain steadfast. She arranges for his education, ensuring Edward is not only pious but also wise, learning languages and the labyrinthine politics of powerful courts. Under her watchful gaze, the seeds of his later gentleness and sense of duty take root, even in the face of bitterness that exile never fully lets fade. Living as an outsider, Edward discovers an unusual sense of empathy for those cast aside. His own suffering carves a deep well of compassion within him, making him more attuned to suffering and injustice. These early trials in Normandy quietly transform him, preparing the young prince to become not only a king but a merciful confessor to his people. He spends long hours in candlelit chapels, hands folded in prayer, his quiet faith growing ever more central to his identity. The solitude and discipline of monastic life entice him, yet the pull of destiny remains the reminder that his journey through faith may one day serve a troubled kingdom rather than end in cloistered peace. Stories circulate at the Norman court about Edward's solemn demeanour and devotion. Some view him as weak or aloof, uncertain if his gentleness is a flaw or a rare virtue. Yet those who watch closely see a steadiness in his Gazetha beginnings, of a resilience rooted not in ambition but in an unwavering trust in God, setting him apart from other royal exiles. The natural world of Normandy, its orchards and meadows, its abbey gardens, offers solace to Edward's homesick soul. His longing for England is soothed by the beauty of a land that, though foreign, teaches him to find peace wherever fate sets him. These moments in nature give weight to the spiritual calm that will define his later days as king. Edward's days are shaped by ritual morning prayers, lessons in Latin, whispered hopes for a return to England. These routines ground him, providing structure and comfort in the uncertainty of exile. Through practice and repetition, his devotion grows stronger, and within each humble task, Edward learns that greatness is forged as much in patience as in power. Occasionally, former English allies visit the Norman court, sparking Edward's memories of home. Their stories stir a longing in his heart, but also reinforce the distance between his past and present. Through their words, Edward learns which friendships have survived. England's upheaval sand, who, if anyone, still dreams of his return as a future king. Emma, though resilient, cannot fully shield Edward from the sting of displacement. Together, mother and son share moments of quiet grief over lost homeland and fractured family, yet in these shared sorrows their bond deepens. From Emma, Edward inherits both her sorrow and her endurance qualities that will steady him through the storms of his eventual reign. Norman mentors notice Edward's willingness to forgive and his patience in adversity. They come to respect this unusual prince whose faith seems untouched by bitterness. Their acceptance does not replace England, but their gentle guidance helps nurture the traits that will later mark Edward as a king, beloved not for conquest but for wisdom and compassion. Over time, Edward's longing for England transforms into a kind of quiet purpose. Exile no longer feels only like loss, it becomes training, a time to nurture hope and prepare for whatever future awaits. Each year brings him closer to a vision of kingship shaped by endurance, humility, and above all, a steadfast faith that will define him forever. The candlelit corridors of Norman monasteries echo with Edward's footsteps. Here, separated from worldly affairs, he discovers the power of silent prayer. The monks, recognizing his sincerity, offer gentle guidance, teaching him that holiness is forged through humble acts. Through these lessons, the seeds of sainthood are sown deep, foreshadowing his later legacy as the Confessor. In Normandy, surrounded by songs in strange tongues and feasts of foreign customs, Edward learns adaptability. He observes, listens, and patiently navigates a life shaped by waiting. Though he cannot know what fate holds, Edward begins to sense that his time as exile is the crucible in which both his faith and his future kingship will be refined beyond all doubt. As this chapter of exile closes, Edward stands poised at the threshold of transformation. The memories of loneliness, the counsel of loving mentors, and the discipline of spiritual practice have reshaped him. Soon, destiny will call him back across the Channel. Yet the lessons of Normandy, faith, patience, and humility remain, etched upon the soul of England's future Confessor King. Chapter 3. Return of the Exile. Edward set foot on English soil once more, the bitter tang of exile still lingering as he surveyed a realm in flux. Danish power wavered with every passing month. Intrigue simmered among the Anglo-Saxon and Danish lords. Edward returned not as a stranger, but as a king. In waiting, burdened with hope, doubt, and the memory of long years spent far from home. Coronation banners fluttered in the unpredictable wind as Edward journeyed towards Winchester, where destiny and pageantry would converge. The people's eyes lingered with curiosity and uncertainty, for few recalled the boy who had once fled his country in haste. Now he bore the quiet resolve of a survivor, keenly aware that the crown he sought to reclaim was both a birthright and a heavy, shifting prize. Edward's ascent was anything but assured. The court was thick with suspicion and rivalry. The legacy of Cnut's sons and the ambitions of English nobles loomed large. He moved quietly, weighing every gesture, every word. Promises were made behind closed doors, alliances offered with warm smiles but cold hands. Edward learned quickly that even as a king in waiting he was little more than a player in a greater game. The new king's path meandered through a landscape of divided loyalties. Old wounds between Dane and Saxon still bled, especially amongst those with the most to lose. Edward's gentle piety and foreign ways set him apart from many of his would-be subjects. Some whispered uncertainty as they knelt. Yet, behind their eyes, calculation danced for power in England was rarely granted freely, and never without cost. As the hour of coronation neared, tension electrified the court. Every step toward the throne was shadowed by negotiation, and threats spoken only in the silence between words. Edward hardly slept, pacing through chambers haunted by memories of exile and the ghosts of rulers past. He wondered if returning home truly meant belonging, or if the crown was another form of exile, heavier and more binding than before. The day itself dawned grey and cool, mist curling over the city as if history itself sought to shroud Edward's claims. Inside the cathedral, holy men whispered prayers for guidance. Nobles straightened their cloaks, eyes scanning friend and rival alike. At the altar, Edward's hands trembled. The crown would soon press upon his head, yet the weight of expectation pressed even harder upon his heart. Ceremony filled the nave with ancient rites and solemn vows. Incense hung thick, blurring the outlines of those who watched. As the bishop raised the crown, silence descended. Edward met the eyes of his assembled lords and thought of the bitter road that had led him here. His voice, clear in its uncertainty, echoed beneath the vaulted stone, and the nation braced itself for the uneasy dawn of a new reign. Even as the crown found its place, silence and suspicion lingered. The great men of the realm bowed stiffly, their thoughts shielded behind curtsy and protocol. Edward's coronation did little to erase doubts. Instead, it marked the beginning of whispered schemes and old scores reawakened. In that high, echoing hall, hope and peril were as entwined as past and present for England's fragile future. After the ceremony, feasting filled the halls, and songs offered a brief respite from trouble. Edward's smile was gentle, but his eyes searched for trust among those gathered at his table. Some nobles pledged loyalty easily, drawn by faith or opportunity. Others watched in wary silence, hands tight around newly forged alliances. Beneath the laughter, anxiety simmered, for England's peace had always been uneasy, hard-won, and easily lost. Edward's foreign upbringing coloured every encounter. His speech carried Norman flourishes, his manners gentle but strangely reserved for an English king. The courtiers whispered and weighed these peculiarities, seeking meaning in every accent and pause. Behind closed doors they wondered whether such a king would ever truly belong, or whether, in time, the voice of exile would fade beneath England's expectations and burdens. Yet faith was Edward's shield and solitary companion. Each morning before dawn he knelt in prayer, seeking comfort where politics offered none. Stories soon spread of his humility and devotion, traits rare among men who wore crowns. Some respected this piety, believing a saintly king might bring blessings to the land. Others, wary and divided, wondered if holiness alone could secure the troubled heart of a kingdom still split by rivalries. The court buzzed with intrigue, each faction manoeuvring for favour. Edward moved quietly but kept sharp counsel, learning quickly who might be trusted, who must be placated, and who would always harbour resentment. The previous Danish rulers had rewarded their own. Now old scores resurfaced, and lords pressed their claims, eager for the new king to tip the scales in their favour and shape the fate of the realm. Amid these tensions, Edward found rare solace with a few loyal advisers, men like Earl Leofric and Godwin of Wessex, each powerful, each with personal ambitions. Even friendship was bound by obligation. Every loyalty was tested by the constant uncertainty of court life. In whispered conversations and guarded exchanges, Edward began to understand the true isolation a king must endure, even when surrounded by people. As summer unfurled, Edward toured his lands, seeking to secure the loyalty of distant nobles. More than once he found himself among those who remembered Cnut's iron rule, or who still grieved families lost to past conflicts. With every greeting and gracious word he tried to knit the frayed fabric of England's unity, stitching together a kingdom that seemed, at every seam, ready to tear apart once again. At times, Edward's mind wandered back to the years of his exile, the quiet monasteries, the foreign tongues, and the strange but steady safety of other lands. There had been peace then, even if it came at the cost of displacement. Now, standing at the head of a kingdom, he grappled with loneliness deeper than any experienced abroad, for the weight of rule pressed relentlessly on his shoulders, day after uncertain day. Despite the turbulence, Edward's reputation as a just, pious ruler slowly grew. Messengers spread tales of his charity and fairness to even the lowest peasant. For a people weary of war and heavy taxes, a gentle king inspired cautious hope. Yet, for every admirer, there lurked a sceptic among the lords, someone who measured success not by saintliness, but by cunning and strength in the shadowy corridors of power. The land itself was restless. Banditry and local disputes flared as the old networks of authority shifted. Edward sent trusted sheriffs and ealdormen to restore order, but every intervention risked upsetting delicate balances. Each royal decree travelled slowly, each instance of justice stirred quiet resistance. Edward's crown was coveted, but it was also a target, drawing both the loyalty and resentment of those it touched. As summer ripened, Edward summoned councils, seeking to bind the nobles together through consultation and shared purpose. Some attended willingly, eager to shape the new reign. Others arrived out of obligation or for the chance to whisper in royal ears. In these gatherings, the future of the nation was debated fiercely, and the seeds of both cooperation and future conflict were planted in words spoken softly and decisively alike. Edward's faith began to shape his kingship in subtle ways. He sponsored churches and monasteries, hoping to strengthen both the spiritual and social fabric of his kingdom. These acts won favour from bishops and the deeply devout, and rumours of his miracles and saintliness began to take root. Still, others grumbled that a king so enthralled by prayer might prove too gentle, might leave England vulnerable to the sharper ambitions of restless men. Behind the scenes, alliances shifted as easily as the tides. Noble families manoeuvred marriage, land grants, and patronage, always with an eye toward future gains. Edward played this game warily, remembering the hard lessons of exile. Each agreement was a careful balance of risk and loyalty, every gesture of trust shadowed by the knowledge that friendships could vanish as quickly as they were forged. Edward never forgot the cost of his return. Messages from Normandy, reminders of old obligations, trickled to his court. Some English lords viewed the Norman connection with suspicion, worried that their homeland might become entangled in foreign disputes. Edward tried to reassure them, treading lightly between past alliances and the pressing demands of his new role, conscious always of the delicate peace that kept the kingdom whole. With the passage of months, Edward's grasp on the crown seemed to steady, yet never completely secure. He learned to govern with patience, favouring negotiation over force whenever possible. But beneath every calm surface, tensions lurked, and the uncertainty that had marked his return lingered still. The memory of exile sharpened Edward's resolve, giving him a sense of purpose that would slowly define his reign. Late in the year, a storm battered the coast, as if to remind the nation of ever-present danger. Inside his palace, Edward listened to the wind howl against stone walls, and wondered if England too was weathering a storm. He prayed for wisdom and for the faith to withstand betrayal and disappointment. The challenges of kingship, he realized, were as relentless as the tides that pounded England's shores. So ended the season of Edward's uneasy ascent. He had returned as an exile and stood crowned as king, yet the kingdom trembled on uncertain ground. Alliances were unsteady, loyalties fragile, and hope for peace flickered like a candle in the wind. But Edward, shaped by faith and adversity, resolved to rule with dignity, sowing seeds for a legacy that would reach far beyond his troubled beginning. Chapter 4. A King Set Apart. Edward's reign was marked not by great conquests or legendary battles, but by an unwavering devotion to faith. Known as the Confessor, this title was not earned from war or bloodshed, but through the quiet power of prayer and piety. Tonight we step into the candlelit silence of his chapels, where royal robes brush stone floors and whispered prayers shape the king's fate. Edward's commitment to his spiritual life was extraordinary for any ruler of his age. While other kings hunted or feasted late into the night, Edward's evenings were spent in prayer, kneeling under the cool shadows of towering abbey walls. The beauty of his rituals mesmerized some, yet unsettled others who expected a king to stand foremost on the battlefield, not before the altar. His devotion was visible in every corner of his court. Edward commissioned abbeys and churches, their spires stretching skyward as evidence of a king longing for greater meaning. Westminster Abbey would be his most lasting gift, an earthly monument intended to echo his spiritual pursuits. These acts of faith went beyond tradition, quietly challenging what it meant to be a sovereign in turbulent times. Warrior nobles watched Edward's holiness with a complicated mix of suspicion and respect. To those who fought with sword and shield, such spiritual commitment could seem like a retreat from the world's harsh realities. Yet others found comfort in a king who sought peace above conquest, believing his prayers offered a shield more potent than any chainmail or lance. In the hush of early morning, Edward walked his palace gardens, beads of his rosary slipping through his fingers. He spoke softly to those he trusted, offering blessings rather than commands. This gentle authority unsettled some and inspired others, setting him apart from the forceful rulers who had come before. People began to wonder, was this piety a strength or a subtle weakness? Edward's daily life was shaped by a careful balance between spiritual obligations and the duties of a king. While religious observance brought him solace, it also drew criticism among advisers who wanted a more assertive leader. This tension played out quietly sometimes in the sighs of restless nobles, sometimes in hushed council discussions. Faith and leadership seemed to walk separate paths in his court. Stories spread throughout England of Edward's miracles and acts of compassion. Pilgrims whispered of healings and answered prayers, crediting him with powers that defied explanation. While legends grew, so did doubts. Some feared that a king so committed to heaven might forget the practical demands of ruling a divided land, where ambition and betrayal still lurked in every shadow. Edward's devotion sometimes brought political consequences. Nobles who valued military strength questioned his choices, worrying that England's enemies would take advantage of a softer king. Still, others felt drawn to his way of leadership, believing that moral clarity was as necessary as any blade. In these private struggles, Edward's heart often ached between faith and duty. At Westminster, Edward's presence was a reassuring sight for pilgrims and monks alike. He attended Mass daily, his expression lost in contemplation. For a brief moment, England's thrones and crowns faded away, replaced by a simple longing to draw closer to the sacred. To clergy and the devout, Edward seemed uniquely chosen, almost saintly even as he still lived. Beyond the chapel, though, not everyone shared this reverence. Some lords grumbled that Edward's largesse to the church drained resources from their own ambitions. Generosity toward abbeys could appear as favoritism, stirring rivalry between sacred and secular powers. Every gift the smallest golden cross, a patch of land became a symbol in an ongoing contest for influence at court. Court life under Edward was quieter than most had ever known. Musicians played softer, laughter held a certain restraint. Even banquets began and ended with prayers for the realm, with Edward's gentle voice leading assembled nobles through solemn blessings. The king's devotion wove invisibly through daily routines, shifting the mood of the palace toward a contemplative, almost monastic calm. But royal peace was fragile. In the flicker of torch-lit halls, plotting nobles debated whether Edward's priorities left England vulnerable. Could prayers shield a kingdom as effectively as armies? This question hung in the air, growing sharper with each blessing the king bestowed. For every supporter soothed by ritual, a rival watched and waited, sensing an opportunity in Edward's gentleness. Edward's faith, though unwavering, did not make him indifferent to his people's needs. He met secretly with petitioners, listened to their troubles, and intervened to settle disputes. These moments of quiet justice, often unnoticed by chroniclers of war, showed another side of King Shiponi, rooted in compassion rather than conquest, kindness instead of intimidation. Meanwhile, England's borders remained restless, threatened by both foreign rivals and internal factions. Edward felt these pressures keenly, even from within the safety of his chapels. He carried burdens few would understand, offering up silent prayers for guidance. Every decision, spiritual or political, weighed against the ultimate challenge of keeping the realm united and at peace. Within the abbey's candlelit choir, Edward found moments of true solace. The hymns and psalms seemed to lift his anxieties heavenward. Here, away from the noise of the court, he could reflect on his hopes for England. His prayers were as urgent as any battle cry, inspired by a vision of harmony that stretched far beyond his own reign. Not all who witnessed Edward's devotion understood its depth. Some saw only a solitary figure, removed from worldly affairs, a king lost in dreams of heaven. Others, though, sensed a different power at work, a moral force that quietly influenced decisions both great and small. Within these simple acts of faith, the foundations of a new legacy were quietly laid. Despite criticism, Edward never wavered from his path. Supported by faithful allies and trusted churchmen, he maintained his daily rituals regardless of courtly grumbling. His constancy became a defining trait, a steady beacon amid outbreaks of unrest. In the face of doubt and disappointment, he showed that strength sometimes looks like patience, and leadership can be rooted in grace. In private moments, Edward confided his greatest worries to confessors and advisers. He questioned whether his calling to a spiritual life could be reconciled with the role of monarch. Was it possible to serve God and England equally, or would devotion always require sacrifice? These silent ponderings haunted his reign, shaping not just decisions but the very atmosphere of the court. Among the people, Edward's reputation flourished. Pilgrims flocked to sites he visited, touching doorways he blessed or kneeling in borrowed pews. The stories travelled far of a king who healed the sick with his touch, who forgave debts, who spent long hours in prayer for those he would never meet. Such tales blurred the line between sovereign and saint. Yet with devotion came loneliness. The quieter Edward's court became, the further he drifted from some of his advisers and family members. Connections once forged by shared ambition now grew thin, replaced by more spiritual ties. In the grand chambers of Westminster, the king sometimes wondered, could one man's search for the divine truly unite a kingdom as fractured as England? Edward's lasting influence can be seen in spiritual reforms he championed. He supported monasteries dedicated to prayer and learning, drawing scholars and monks from distant lands. Through these efforts, the king created havens of wisdom and peace centres of faith where the troubled could find sanctuary, and where England itself might find a measure of healing. Every act of devotion, however, had a political shadow. By aligning himself so closely with the Church, Edward also strengthened its hand in matters of governance. Bishops and abbots gained influence, sometimes rivaling secular lords for the king's ear. This shifting balance would shape royal policies for years, changing how power moved through England's tangled web of loyalties. By the end of his reign, Edward's dual legacy was clear for all to see. In the minds of the faithful, he stood as a model of Piatia king set apart from violence and greed. Among the nobles, however, questions remained about what his faith had cost the kingdom. The tension between spiritual ideals and worldly realities refused to fade, an echo haunting the royal line. Though Edward would one day be canonized as a saint, the truth of his reign defied simple answers. He was both distant and compassionate, powerful and vulnerable, shaped by prayer yet bound to duty. Through him, England glimpsed a different path for its ruler's own, where faith was not a weakness, but a crown set apart. The story would continue, shaped by all he left behind. Chapter 5. Shadowed Halls and Rival Lords. Within Edward's court, silent tension lingers in the air as powerful lords gather in the flickering candlelight. Smoke curls through the halls, carrying whispered secrets and careful promises. The throne sits at the heart of this storm, fragile, dangerous, coveted. Edward, cloaked in both sanctity and solitude, must now face the wily ambitions of those who seek to bend the kingdom's destiny to their own design. The Godwins, England's most formidable noble house, cast a long shadow across the realm. Their alliances stretch across the land, their loyalty ever uncertain. Edward, wary yet bound by royal duty, must negotiate with these powerful rivals. Each conversation, each shared meal or narrow glance carries the weight of threat and possibility. The king treads carefully among wolves, knowing that even the smallest misstep could spark disaster within his court. In these dim corridors, voices are hushed, but intentions run deep. Allies reshuffle at a moment's notice, balancing private interests against the needs of the crown. Edward's calm exterior belies the constant calculations unfolding in his mind how to outmaneuver the Godwins without plunging the realm into open conflict. Every evening, candles burn short, and nerves wear thin as old feuds threaten to break the fragile peace enveloping the kingdom. Edward's spiritual nature, while revered by many, sometimes makes him seem distant and unworldly amid these fiercely political times. The nobles watch his every move, weighing whether piety equates to weakness. Some seek to exploit his temperament, hoping to mould decisions in their favour. Edward, aware of these perceptions, strives to demonstrate resolve and maintain authority, all while clinging to his faith as a compass amid shifting alliances. Loyalty is an ever-changing currency in Edward's court. Toasts sworn one night can dissolve by dawn, replaced by new schemes and secret agreements. Among the noble ranks, ambition is rarely idle. The Godwins, led by the formidable Earl Godwin, move with subtlety and force, testing Edward's patience as well as his ability to bind the kingdom together. Each day brings a new gambit, some overt, others cloaked in apparent civility. Edward's bonds with the Godwins are complicated by family ties. His wife, Edith, is Godwin's daughter, which brings moments of uneasy trust but also ever-present suspicion. A wrong gesture or careless word can be twisted, fueling rumours across the realm. Marriage, meant to secure support, now serves as a double-edged sword, offering protection at times, yet always carrying sharp potential for betrayal. Edward must steer wisely between affection and caution. All the while, hidden eyes watch Edward's every decision. Servants and scribes, messengers and minor lords all, caught in the web of courtly intrigue, report back to their masters. News travels at the speed of rumour, painting Edward as either naive or dangerous, depending on who is listening. His challenge grows as every attempt to assert royal power is scrutinised and weighed in the balance of noble self-interest. Illuminated manuscripts might one day capture the grandeur of this court, but what they cannot show is the burden pressing on Edward's shoulders. He must appease powerful nobles without eroding his own authority. The Godwins test his limits, pushing for more influence at every turn. With each council meeting, Edward is forced to weigh the survival of his lineage against the unity and future prosperity of his kingdom. A single word or even the lack of a word can decide the fate of a kingdom. In the shadowed halls, Edward often chooses silence, letting others reveal their motives. This reserve frustrates the Godwins, who hunger for clarity. Yet the king knows that speech can be a weapon as sharp as any blade. He relies on this restraint, reading the court's tensions while plotting his next move like a chess master facing clever opponents. Behind closed doors, the Godwins hold family councils, plotting strategies to increase their sway. Each brother has his own ambitions, dividing and uniting as needed, always with an eye toward their own fortune. Edward is never far from their thoughts, his authority both a barrier and a prize. The dance of rivalry and necessity frames each interaction. The king's trust, once gained, is easily lost on the shifting tides of ambition. In an effort to balance noble power, Edward sometimes seeks allies beyond the Godwin circle. He invites Norman courtiers and other foreign nobles, hoping to dilute the Godwins' dominance. This inflames homegrown resentment, however, stirring whispers of favoritism and betrayal. Every courtly spectacle, every grand feast, becomes another stage on which loyalties are tested, and the king's wisdom, or folly, is laid bare for all to witness and discuss. The chroniclers would later remark on Edward's patience here, quality tested time and again by the fractious lords encircling his throne. When tempers flare and threats are whispered, he answers not with force but with measured words and carefully weighed decisions. Some call it shrewdness, others weakness. Whatever the opinion, Edward's reliance on diplomacy becomes both shield and sword, allowing his reign to endure, at least for a time. Diplomatic gifts and honours are traded in the court, each one a signal subtle invitations for loyalty or a cue for caution. Edward dispenses these tokens with careful calculation, aware that too much or too little could disrupt the delicate equilibrium. The Godwins and rival families keenly observe each gesture, measuring their place in the king's esteem. Beneath every bow or blessing lies the quiet hum of ambition and strategy. Sometimes, as night falls and the court becomes quiet, Edward seeks solace in prayer. The candle's glow casts his shadow long and uncertain, mirroring his doubts. He asks for guidance to see through deception and hold true to both his realm and his conscience. Here, in these moments of solitude, are glimpses of the gentle heart behind the royal mask, burdened but undeterred by the relentless demands of kingship. Amid all this plotting, threats of outright rebellion loom. The Godwins are not above raising arms should negotiations fail. Edward recalls past exiles and pardons, knowing that mercy is sometimes the only way to prevent bloodshed. But forgiveness too has its limits. To show weakness risks encouraging revolt, to rule with iron only deepens divides. The king's struggle is unending, a delicate game of intention, power, and survival. Whispers about the succession begin to circulate. With Edward childless, every noble wonders who will one day wear the crown. The Godwins, ambitious as ever, position themselves as indispensable to the realm's future. Edward is trapped between the pressure to name an heir and the danger of igniting civil war by favouring one faction over another. Each path ahead is tangled, fraught with tension and the potential for tragedy. Council meetings turn into battlegrounds where words are chosen with care, each phrase carrying double meanings. The Godwins sit nearest the king, their presence a constant reminder of their influence. Every proposal, every request is weighed against private calculations. The court grows ever more divided. Rivals look for weaknesses while Edward strives to keep the peace. Victory can come silently through manoeuvring, not swords. Edward's adherence to faith is not always understood by his lords. In matters both religious and political, he walks a narrow path, seeking to honour his convictions without losing grasp of worldly necessity. To the Godwins, his piety may seem naive. To his supporters, it is a source of hope. In every judgment delivered, both heaven and earth seem to be watching, their expectations heavy on the lonely king's shoulders. Some nights, echoes from battles past reverberate through Edward's dreams. He remembers times when power shifted not with words but with steel. Yet now victory hinges on wisdom, patience, and the ability to see beyond immediate threats. The Godwins, always circling, put his restraint to the test. As unrest simmers below the surface, Edward fights for Unidot just for his own sake, but for the future of a fragile England. Rumours swirl through the great halls. Was it the king's heart or the Lord's will that shaped England's policy? Each guest at court is drawn into the current of intrigue, compelled to take sides or risk being swept away. The Godwins gather information, forging alliances or sowing discord as best serves their interests. Edward, surrounded by uncertainty, must trust his intuition, relying on his own sense of justice to steer through chaos. Despite the perils, moments of genuine camaraderie still spark among the nobles. A jest shared, a memory recalled, hints at the closeness born of shared history. Edward, ever gentle, nurtures these brief harmonies, hoping to ease the court's tension. Yet, beneath each laugh or toast, politics unfurl their silent threads, reminder of how unity in the throne room often masks deeper divides outside its gilded doors. Edward's vision of kingship is rooted in justice and peace, but reality asks for more. Strategy, compromise, and sometimes ruthless decisiveness are needed to withstand rival lords. The Godwins prove themselves skilled adversaries, adaptable, relentless. The court's balance is delicate, and every decision Edward makes reverberates through the land. In this time of unrest, the king's resolve will either cement his legacy or see his power slip away. Amid the grandeur and ceremony, Edward stands ever watchful, his expression calm, his mind tirelessly at work. Every gesture he makes, every audience he grants, is weighted with intent. The court's rituals may be centuries old, but their true meaning lies in the play of power. As alliances shift and rivalries smoulder, Edward's choices become ever more critical to keep his throne and the nation itself intact. In the end, the shadowed halls of Edward's court bear witness to the struggle that defines his reign. Each flickering candle reveals both ambition and anxiety etched onto noble faces. As England teeters between old loyalties and new ambitions, Edward must trust not just his counsellors but his innermost wisdom. The chapter draws to a close, with power, faith and fate intertwined, leaving the outcome ever uncertain as another day dawns in the kingdom. Chapter 6. Prophecy and Promise. As Edward the Confessor's reign unfolds, it is surrounded by a web of legends and whispered omens. Every courtier and noble speculates about signs in the stars, strange dreams, and cryptic prophecies that seem to steer the course of power. The atmosphere is thick with superstition. In these shadowed halls, fate appears almost tangible, and hope for a clear succession grows ever more fraught. Word spreads of an ancient prophecy hinting at England's destiny resting with a holy king whose reign will both bless and unsettle the kingdom. Seers and pilgrims arrive at court, each professing visions of Edward crowned in celestial light. These tales, whether born of faith or opportunism, feed both awe and anxiety among those who seek to influence or inherit the throne, blurring the lines between fate and ambition. Whispers echo through stone corridors. Was Edward truly chosen by God? His reputation for divine favour intensifies the stakes, turning every unusual occurrence into a possible omen. In the shadows, nobles interpret eclipses, comets, and even ailing livestock as signs meant to forecast triumph or disaster. The king's stillness seems holy to some, but to others it is a silent warning of uncertainty yet to come. Superstition weaves its way into policy. Advisers argue for or against decisions based on portents. Some urge Edward to secure his dynasty through force or diplomacy, fearing the consequences of ignoring supposed signs. Yet the king remains contemplative, raising questions. Are these prophecies true counsel, or mere reflections of human desire? The court trembles under the weight of not just politics, but the unseen hand of fate. Among Edward's inner circle, certain visions take particular hold. One recounts a monk's dream of a royal line ending in peace, while another claims to have seen a burning crown heralding chaos. Letters and rumours circulate widely. Some are weaponized against rivals, others intended to reassure allies. Edward listens gravely, his own sense of mission shaped yet haunted by these swirling legends that bind the royal future to the winds of prophecy. Noble ambition is sharpened by every tale. The nobility is quick to interpret omens to suit their purpose, spinning stories to justify their ambitions or challenge their adversaries. In candlelit gatherings, alliances are forged, sometimes broken, as each lord tries to read destiny itself. Edward's court becomes a theatre where superstition walks beside strategy, and men are as ready with interpretations as with swords. Diplomatic marriages are seen as more than alliances. They are weighed as acts that might fulfill or confound fate. Every union is scrutinized for its foretold promise, while foreign envoys bring their own prophets to sway Edward's decisions. The king, ever measured, must navigate a treacherous course where personal happiness, public expectation, and the tangled roots of prophecy are tightly intertwined, testing his resolve and faith alike. Edward's controversial vow of chastity becomes central to courtly intrigue. Many saw this spiritual commitment as both a sign of holiness and a dangerous barrier to succession. Did a vision inspire this vow, or did the weight of piety press too hard? Nobles grow restless, worried that denying an heir could unravel all order, and perhaps fulfill a darker side of prophecy whispered in the abbeys and halls. Voices from the clergy lift Edward's vow as evidence of sanctity, likening him to ancient saints whose purity protected the land. Yet not all are convinced. Rival factions spread doubts, declaring that England's security requires a robust dynasty, not a childless saint. The tension between religious reverence and pragmatic rule intensifies, framing Edward's personal piety as both shield and shadow over the nation's destiny. At court, expectations shift like tides. Some nobles hope for a miraclear vision or dream that will clarify succession, perhaps inspire Edward to reconsider his vow. Others look abroad, courting foreign alliances, convinced that only by hedging their bets can they serve both faith and ambition. The realm becomes a tapestry of whispered prayers and calculated plans, each thread coloured by the hope that fate will finally speak clearly. Disputes over succession grow sharper, fueled by prophetic claims. Relatives and distant claimants consult mystics, seeking omens that favour their bloodlines. Stories abound of dreams in which the rightful heir receives a sign some told in confidence, others shared to gain support. Every vision adds fuel to the fire, as those seeking power use prophecy to bolster credibility or challenge the standing of rivals. Edward himself is not immune to the allure of prophecy. Chroniclers note moments when he retreats into prayer after reports of strange happenings or troubling visions. The boundary between ruler and mystic blurs, as his decisions occasionally seem swayed as much by spiritual guidance as by worldly advisers. For the watchful court, any sign of the king's shifting focus becomes an opportunity or a risk, depending on their ambitions, As pressure mounts, superstitious rituals gain popularity. Nobles commission relics and prayers, seeking to ward off ill fortune or draw down divine favour on their houses. Rival factions invoke saints, consult astrologers, and scrutinize ancient runes in search of clarity. The court buzzes with stories of visions, blessings, and curses the air thick with a belief that destiny can be swayed, if only one knows the right words or offerings. For Edward, marriage negotiations grow ever more delicate. Every proposed match is shadowed by prophecy. Will this union strengthen the realm or doom it to turmoil? Queens are chosen not just for lineage, but for the omens attendant upon their arrival. Frustration simmers beneath the gilded surface as hopes rise and fall with every rumour of a fateful dream or the appearance of a mysterious sign at court. The king's family is not spared. Edward's wife, Edith, becomes a figure of speculation. Some claim she too has visions, perhaps influencing her husband in matters of state and succession. In the cloistered safety of her chambers, whispered prayers mix with worries for the future. Even the royal household trembles under the same constellation of hope, anxiety, and prophetic expectation binding the kingdom together. Across England, the common folk share in the sense of suspense. Tales of omens spread quickly, dreams of blood-red moons, of rivers running the wrong way, of birds gathering in strange patterns. These stories filter back to the court, giving voice to popular anxieties and shaping how the crown presents itself. Edward's ability to balance sacred narrative with the practical needs of rule becomes a test of leadership like no other. Meanwhile, foreign rulers observe England's uncertainty with wary interest. Some send envoys bearing prophecies of friendship or threat, hoping to nudge Edward's choices in their favour. The interplay of destiny and diplomacy grows ever more complex, as prophecy becomes a new language in courtly negotiation. All the while, the king's vow and reputation for holiness raise more questions than they settle. Behind every council meeting and private chamber talk, the shadow of fate lingers. Many believe that the king's soul is bound to the kingdom's fortune, so every sign is weighed with careful dread or hope. Edward's serenity in the face of uncertainty inspires some, but troubles others, especially those who fear an empty throne will bring chaos. The court's focus tightens. Will faith or fate decide England's next chapter? Chroniclers record these years as a time of restless anticipation. Their accounts blend fact with reverence, making it difficult to unravel what truly happened from the legends that grew in the telling. The written word, laden with superstition, ensures that every omen and vow becomes both history and cautionary tally, an enduring testament to the power of belief in shaping the course of nations. As Edward ages, the pressure to resolve the question of succession intensifies. Nobles redouble their efforts to broker advantageous marriages or interpret signs that favour their ambitions. The king's piety is revered by some, resented by others, but none can escape its influence. The court holds its breath, with each passing year bringing new stories, new omens, and greater urgency for clarity before fate intervenes unkindly. Visions recorded during these years reflect both hope and dread. Some tell of peaceful transitions, an era of saints and prosperity. Others foreshadow dark times, foreign invasions, civil strife, the shattering of England's peace. These contradictory prophecies battle for dominance in the hearts of Edward's subjects, ensuring that anxiety and uncertainty cling to every action and decree made in the crowded halls of power. In the king's hushed moments of reflection, he contemplates the words spoken by mystics and visionaries. Does he sense the weight of all England resting on his choices, his prayers, his promises? The lines between ruler and legend grow thin as the end of his reign approaches. Soon those final decisions, themselves steeped in prophecy, will decide if his legacy is remembered as blessed or accursed. As fate would have it, the unresolved prophecies of Edward's time become fuel for future claims to the throne. After his death, those who come after will invoke his visions and vows to stake their right to rule. Thus the tapestry woven by superstition and faith is left unfinished, its meaning forever open to interpretation, and its power still felt long after Edward's earthly reign ends. In the end, prophecy and promise both guided and haunted Edward's reign. The court, shaped as much by hope as by fear, would remember him as a king who walked between two worlds, the earth and the divine. His story, woven with omens and dreams, sets the stage for the chaos and transformation yet to come, revealing the enduring power of belief over the fate of a nation. Chapter 7. The Waning of the Old Order. In the dim corridors of Edward's palace, a heavy quiet has settled. Age lines the king's face and illness shadows his days, making each hour feel precious and uncertain. Whispers fill the royal court, unspoken fears growing louder as his strength ebbs. Across England, a storm of anxiety gathers, for the fate of an entire kingdom now hinges on a frail and failing king. Within the candlelit sanctuaries and bustling marketplaces, news of Edward's deteriorating health travels swiftly. The people remember his piety and justice, but in their homes unease replaces comfort. Nobles watch for a sign, servants exchange furtive glances, and clergy pray for clarity. A once stable realm now teeters, hearts heavy with questions that echo through the land. Who will wear the crown when Edward's days are done? Beyond the palace walls, powerful families sharpen their ambitions. Court factions jostle for position, some whisper loyalties, others plot in shadows. In great halls and firelit chambers, rival claimants measure their chances. Hopes and fears intertwine in every conversation, each rumour a spark that could ignite conflict. As the horizon darkens, England's future becomes a precarious game of chess, each piece carefully watched, every move deliberate. Edward, once the hope of a troubled kingdom, withdraws increasingly into prayer. Guided by faith, he seeks solace in quiet chapels, his mind echoing with memories of his youth and the burdens of kingship. Trusted advisers gather respectfully, voices hushed, trying not to betray their dread. The king's weakened voice carries little assurance now, but every word is weighed for hints about his final wishes and chosen successor. Throughout the countryside, village elders and townsfolk gather in anxious clusters. Tales of earlier kings wise and unwiser surface by hearthfire, their lessons pondered. The uncertainty of succession brings fear, for the scars of past civil strife linger. Many dread the return of old feuds, praying that Edward's holiness will guide him to secure peace before death's approach. Yet as the days slip by, hope mingle with insecurity. In luxurious yet tense gatherings, earls and lords analyze every royal decree. Some recall promises whispered in secret, oaths pressed into wavering hands. Alliances are quietly forged and broken, as the throne's vacancy promises both peril and opportunity. Each noble family eyes its rivals, hidden ambitions barely concealed. In these turbulent moments, trust is rare, and ambition sharpens its edge, ready for the inevitable struggle ahead. Edward's queen, Edith, moves gracefully through the palace, her face serene yet eyes vigilant. She tends to the king, yet she also consults with trusted allies, guarding her own interests and those of her powerful family. The Godwinsons, never far from controversy, sense the shifting tide, ever alert to threats and chances. In whispered corridors, the stakes of succession grow more urgent with each passing day. Courtiers accept sleepless nights as routine, sharing anxious glances beneath flickering torches. Some write urgent letters to distant allies, while others listen intently at keyholes. The possibility of civil war haunts their dreams, their loyalty torn between the fading king and their own uncertain futures. Even the most seasoned advisers can offer little comfort, for the outcome feels as unpredictable as a storm at sea. In monasteries across the kingdom, monks kneel in ceaseless prayer for Edward's soul and England's fate. Their tranquil chants carry hopes of peace, yet anxiety hums beneath the sacred words. Chroniclers discreetly record each development, knowing that history is turning and that their manuscripts will one day recount this age of tension. Even the sacred cloisters feel the tremors as power prepares to change hands. Messages pass rapidly along muddy roads and swift rivers. Envoys of noble houses travel by night, bearing news and requests for allegiance. Saxon earls consult old laws, searching ancient precedent for guidance, while Norman lords abroad wait for any sign that their fortunes might rise once Edward's reign ends. From the highest echelons to the humblest peasants, everyone feels the pull of the uncertain future. Edward spends long hours in contemplation. Candlelight flickers over sacred texts. His thoughts drift between duty and mortality. The weight of a nation sits heavily on his ailing shoulders. He wonders if his legacy will endure, or if chaos will engulf his people. With gentle resolve, he seeks counsel from his most faithful, his words carrying hope for a peaceful transition, yet also carrying the sorrow of a king with no clear heir. At night, dreams of the past mingle with visions of what may come. Edward recalls childhood prayers in Norman exile, and the hard-won acceptance of his return to England. Now, coughs rack his body as night deepens and uncertainty gnaws at the fabric of his court. Outside, the wind whistles through stone corridors, carrying with it the distant howls of hungry wolves and the silent footfalls of waiting rivals. In the shadowy corners of London, conspirators convene. Fires hiss and crackle as urgent whispers pass between anxious hands. Ambitions once held in check now burn with renewed fervour. Some seek foreign backing, others trust in their heritage alone. The boundaries between hope and desperation blur as plots to secure the throne gain momentum. Every heart beats faster amid the fevered anticipation of power on the precipice. Rumours flicker like sparks in the taverns and markets of England's towns. Merchants trade gossip as eagerly as goods, passing stories of Norman princes, distant cousins, and secret promises. The question of succession infects all conversation, from shepherds tending fields to craftsmen at their forges. Anxiety ripples outward. All understand that the ending of this era will not come quietly. History's tides gather, ready to sweep all before them. Diplomats from distant realms arrive, bearing gifts and coded words. The French and the Norwegians watch England's unfolding crisis, each calculating the advantage of a divided throne. Edward's failing strength offers opportunity to all aspirants near and far. In lavish feasts and discreet audiences, subtle pressures are applied and promises exchanged. The king's weakening grasp means England is not just a nation, but a prize observed from beyond its shores. Even those who have served Edward faithfully wonder what changes may come. Old companions reminisce by the fire, worrying that years of loyalty may not guarantee safety if new power rises. Oaths once sworn to the pious king could bind them tightly or serve as a rope to hang their futures. As the king's breath grows heavier, these men count their blessings and secretly measure their escape routes. The sound of church bells echo through city and countryside, marking both ordinary days and a time out of joint. Priests offer blessings to anxious parishioners, comforting them with scripture while privately fearing the violence that a succession crisis can bring. Children sense their parents' apprehension. Play is subdued and laughter rare. From cathedral to cottage, the rhythm of life beats an uneasy tattoo as all wait for what comes next. In the royal council chamber, discussion turns sharper by the day. Landed lords demand reassurance as knights hover near, hands never far from sword hilts. Every decision seems heavy with consequence. Doherty, a seasoned adviser, pleads for moderation, while young courtiers stir for action. Between hushed arguments, glances flicker toward the closed door behind which Edward rests, his fate entwined with theirs more than ever before. Amid this turmoil, the king's confessor offers comfort. The priest's gentle words surround Edward in compassion, guiding his spirit as he contemplates the kingdom's future. He speaks of faith's power to heal not only bodies, but the divisions tearing at England's heart. The old king clings to these assurances, but even prayer cannot deny the gathering storm. His eyes linger on the crown, now appearing heavier than ever. Those with ambitions for the throne grow bolder. Harold Godwinson moves with calculated purpose, balancing public declarations of loyalty with private conversations promising future power. Across the Channel, Duke William of Normandy sharpens his claim. The shadows lengthen as England's fate becomes a contest not only of birthright, but of cunning, networks, and timing. The kingdom breathes in suspense, each day closer to a reckoning. In noble halls, children are hushed as adults talk in anxious circles about the end of an era. Genealogies are studied, bloodlines traced, and possible marriages discussed as strategies for securing claims. Family loyalties face tests, with some favouring peace and others stoking the fires of ambition. The fate of households like that of the Kingdom No feels as fragile as the wavering light of a winter candle. Edward's physical world narrows, but his influence reaches far. Messages drafted in his trembling hand still carry weight, even as his signature grows shaky. Nobles bend low for his blessing, seeking a sign of approval for their aspirations. Though his voice is faint, it can still provoke hope or fear. Every gesture, every nod deliberate or notice, absorbed and interpreted in this atmosphere charged with anticipation. As the king's life falters, omens and signs are hungrily sought. An eclipse darkens the sky, read by some as a warning of chaos to come. Prophets mutter grim predictions while the court's wisest minds struggle for clarity. In these superstitious days, every misfortune is seen as confirmation of fate's turning. Edward's legacy, entwined with myth and hope, becomes as mysterious as what awaits England after his final breath. In the final days, the air in Westminster is brittle with waiting. Bells toll at odd hours, footsteps echo through hushed halls. The king's closest circle keeps vigil, caught between reverence and anxiety. Outside, the people gather for news, uncertain of what sunrise will bring. Suspense tightens its grip. As Edward's chapter nears its end, all eyes are fixed upon England's throne, wondering whose story is about to begin. Chapter 8. Death of the Confessor. Night descends upon Westminster as Edward the Confessor lies still upon his bed, the flickering candlelight casting solemn shadows across his pale face. Courtiers stand by in silent vigil, their whispered prayers mingling with the heavy air. The silence is profound, as if the realm itself holds its breath. In these final moments the king's saintly aura seems almost palpable, a calm before a coming storm. An air of sacred ritual fills the chamber. Close advisers gather, each aware they bear witness to the passing of an age. Edward's breathing grows softer, his eyes half-lidded but serene. On a cushion at his bedside, the crown now rests a silent witness to the end of a reign. The hush surrounding the king is broken only by the soft intoning of priests, their prayers seeking comfort for his soul and peace for his kingdom. Outside the bedchamber, the great halls of Westminster echo with the news. Edward's life flickers like a guttering flame. Nobles and servants alike await the inevitable, hearts heavy with apprehension. The shadow of uncertainty looms large, all eyes are fixed on the king's chamber door. Within, the presence of the crown beside him feels symbolic an unspoken question about the future. As Edward's strength wanes, stories already begin to swirl around his piety. Those closest to him recall his acts of charity, his devotion to the church, and the miracles rumoured at his touch. In these final hours, his reputation as a living saint grows ever brighter. Yet this holy aura cannot soothe the anxious whispers that curl like smoke through the palace who will wear the crown next. Edward's laboured breaths slow, each one marking the end of a dynasty. The gathered priests murmur prayers, their voices weaving a fragile shroud around the king's soul. Candles flicker, illuminating tear-streaked faces and trembling hands clasped in hope and fear. The halls beyond remain shrouded in suspense, as if all of England waits for a sign. The weight of history presses down on every heart present. A chill settles in the air as Edward's passing becomes certain. The priest's final blessing murmurs into silence. Courtiers bow their heads, some weeping openly. The king's gentle expression seems to linger, serene in death as in life. The crown, untouched, gleams in sorrowful lamplight. Rumours ripple through the palace corridor's absence of an heir now threatens the fragile peace Edward kept. The court stands frozen, unsure what dawn will bring. Edward's body is carefully prepared according to tradition, wrapped in rich cloth and anointed with holy oils. The rituals of death, both solemn and grand, mask the sense of dread that now knits itself into every conversation. Some recall his gentle rule, others wonder if a saint's virtue can protect a land in turmoil. Around his bier, those closest to the king steal final, lingering glances his journey complete, but the realm's fate now perilously open. Word spreads quickly. The confessor is dead. Bishops gather, their robes sweeping across cold stone floors as they prepare the rites. News reaches the city bells toll from distant towers, their mournful sounds signalling change. On the streets, commoners hear of Edward's passing and remember stories of his kindness. Yet whispers are laced with unease, for everyone knows that the question of succession is no longer just a royal concern, it will soon touch every life. Back in the palace, the crown stays at Edward's side, a potent emblem of uncertainty now. Noble families linger in the shadows, wary mouths set in grim lines as they weigh old rivalries and alliances. The court's hush thickens with tension, the grandeur of the scene unable to conceal undercurrents of fear. Edward's reputation as a saintly king is already being woven into legend, even as the scramble for the throne quietly begins. A subtle transformation touches the palace. Edward's funeral rites unfold with reverence, and pageantry incense drifts upon the air, golden artifacts gleam by candlelight, and Latin chants echo along vaulted ceilings. Yet beneath this sacred display, every noble pair of eyes scans the room, gauging power, predicting moves. The confessor's holiness only emphasizes the gravity of his loss. This is not just the death of a king, but the opening act of greater turmoil. All across England, churches hold masses for Edward's soul. The clergy extol his purity, his miracles, his generosity to the poor. Parishioners kneel, asking for his intercession in heaven. But amid prayers for the dead king, anxiety stirs. There is no clear heir, no written succession. Whispers in the pews echo the silent dread in the palace. The realm stands at a crossroads, waiting for a new chapter to unfold. Edward's saintly renown only grows in the hours since his death. Stories are retold in hushed voice show. He healed the sick, how he endured rivalries with patience, how he favoured the building of churches over feuding with lords. Few dwell on his failures, all are drawn to his image as the gentle confessor, a king whose piety became his legacy. Yet, as the hours pass, the absence of an heir looms ever larger over this fragile calm. With dawn's first light, courtiers resume their duties, faces drawn and weary. Edward's body lies in state, honoured by his people but orphaned by history's design. A procession begins to form. The king will soon be carried to his final resting place. The hush has deepened into a weight that presses on every heart. The future, suddenly uncertain, beckons with both hope and danger, a realm adrift without its confessor. The chroniclers soon set their quills to parchment. Edward's life is memorialized with words fit for a saint, stories of humility, charity, quiet wisdom. Artists sketch his likeness, capturing not just the king but the myth already taking root. Even as they celebrate his virtues, their eyes flick to the crown. Who will take up its burden? With every legend told, the coming succession crisis feels more acute. Edward's holiness, a beacon but also a shadow. In the abbey's cold morning, nobles gather for Edward's burial. Cloaks swirl, faces half hidden as prayers are offered for the lost monarch. The crown is set atop the coffin, a stark symbol of the void he leaves behind. Tension crackles beneath whispered condolences, for everyone present knows that ancient rivalries are about to rekindle. The king's final journey is marred by uncertainty, a passage not only into death but into historical upheaval. As the cortege winds its way to Edward's tomb, commoners line the streets, heads bowed. Their sorrow is mingled with a curious hope. Perhaps the king's holiness will bring peace even after death. In the shadows of stone archways lurk messengers already tasked with reaching distant claimants. News travels swiftly, the realm braces itself for what comes next. Edward's journey concludes, but the land he leaves is fraught with question sand poised on the edge of conflict. Within the abbey, candles burn low around Edward's tomb. Bishops lead solemn prayers, their chants rising to the rafters, while nobles glance sidelong, weighing alliances. Some see this as the closing of the old England, others as the birth of a new. The king's saintly legacy is sealed as his body is laid to rest, but his lack of an heir has unleashed a dangerous uncertainty. The memory of the Confessor will shape what follows, for good or ill. As night returns, the court remains subdued. Rumours spread through the corridors who among them will claim the crown. Edward's death without a son reverberates through both royal and religious circles. Old agreements and ambitions rear their heads as lords plot their next move. Edward's sanctity is lauded in hushed tones, but terror churns beneath the surface. Peace is fleeting now, history's wheel prepares to turn once more. Writers record omens seen on the night of Edward's passing strange lights above the palace, ravens gathering on rooftops. These superstitions mingle with sombre realism. The spiritual vacuum Edward leaves behind is matched only by the political one. The future of England will hinge not on saintliness but on strength and cunning. Even so, the gentle Confessor is mourned, and in every retelling he becomes a little more holy, his legacy shaped by what comes next. The Church begins the process of canonization. Edward's miracles reviewed, his gentleness praised. The faithful flock to his tomb, seeking healing or a sign. For some, Edward becomes the heavenly protector of a troubled land. For others, a king whose childlessness brought calamity. The crown, now without a head, becomes a symboler, warning of what happens when a saint rules, but leaves no clear successor. England waits, restless and anxious, poised on the cusp of change. As days pass, memories of Edward grow intertwined with legend. Tales of his miracles are told in homes and churches, while nobles send envoys across the sea, each seeking favour, each fearing rivals. Edward's saintly fame becomes a balm for the sorrowing, yet cannot resolve the question of rule. A great silence lingers in the realm, stretched taut by uncertainty. The Confessor's peaceful reign is a bittersweet memory. The future, ever more unsettled, beckons with promise and peril. The crown, once vibrant on Edward's brow, gathers dust upon a velvet pillow. In council chambers, lords argue and priests debate. Some name Harold Godwinson as the rightful successor, others honour distant claims. Old wounds resurface, chieftains recall faded grievances, foreign princes sharpen their ambitions. Against all this, Edward's saintly image stands as both shield and challenge. His virtues united a kingdom in life, now his absence threatens to tear it apart. Soon, England's fate hurtles toward conflict. The death of Edward the Confessor becomes the silent catalyst for the great storm to come. Old certainties dissolve as families, armies and nations prepare to stake their claims. Edwardans, cherished for his serenity now, appears as a tragic figure whose very sainthood left a vacuum. The shadow of Hastings looms, and while prayers for the Confessor echo in churches, the countryside readies for war. In death, Edward the Confessor achieves what he never could in life, a unity of legend, if not of rule. His memory endures in churches, in tales, and in the hearts of those who crave justice and mercy. Yet his failure to secure a peaceful succession casts a long shadow. England will never be the same. The age of saints has passed, and the struggle for the crown will reshape the destiny of a nation. The story continues. Chapter 9. The Succession Crisis and the Tide of Fate. With the passing of Edward the Confessor, a tense stillness settles across the land. In Westminster, candlelight flickers over anxious faces as word spreads. Those close to the throne grasp the enormity there is no clear heir. The delicate order of England is about to be shattered, and uncertainty seeps into the veins of nobles and commoners alike, all sensing that fate hovers at the gates. Harold Godwinson, England's formidable earl, acts with haste. With barely a day's pause for mourning, the witan gathers under low winter skies. Nobles murmur, some fearful, some ambitious, as Harold is swiftly chosen and crowned. The coronation bell echoes through the city, mingling relief with apprehension. Few suspect that this coronation, meant to unite England, marks only the beginning of a storm unlike any before it. Beyond the Channel, in Normandy, Duke William's courtiers explode with indignation. William is certain Edward promised him the throne. Messengers gallop through icy winds, carrying the news. In Norman halls, tension crackles, preparations for invasion spark to life. Back in England, rumours swirl that William will gather ships and swords. The sense of unease grows heavier, and the shadow of foreign ambition lengthens over the kingdom's winter fields. Yet it is not only the Normans who watch with hungry resolve. Across the northern sea, Harald Hardrada of Norway receives tidings of Edward's death. The Norse king's eyes glint with the hope of conquest. He too sees himself as England's rightful ruler. Viking longships, veteran warriors, and old grievances stir. England stands at a crossroads, stalked by threats from every horizon, and all bound by fate to this pivotal moment. As power converges upon England, a sense of foreboding seeps through villages and towns. Whispers of strange omens mingle with the sighs of widows and the prayers of monks. A comet blazes across the night sky, its tail flaming above silent fields. Some call it a sign of calamity or divine judgment. The air is thick with anxiety. Every portent is weighed for what it might reveal about the uncertain days ahead. London streets crackle with debate and rumour. Merchants, clerks, and clergy all try to decipher what the future holds. Did Edward truly promise the crown to William, or is Harold's claim just? At the edges of candlelit tables, secrets are traded and alliances quietly formed. The city is alive with purpose and fear. Abroad, word of England's crisis travels quickly, igniting hopes in the hearts of rivals and would-be conquerors alike. Harold, now king, wastes no time. He steps from the shadow of Edward's memory, gathering nobles and commanders around him. Each pledge of fealty is tinged with doubt. In the carved halls of Westminster, maps are unrolled, battle plans drawn hastily as the threat of invasion looms. Even in sleep, Harold's dreams are restless, haunted by images of Norman sails and the grim, resolute faces of his enemies. While winter still holds the land in its grip, spies cross the sea. Harold's network stretches from English ports to Norman shores, gleaning whispers of William's preparations. Back in England, church bells toll for Edward, but also as warnings. The land feels brittle. People cling to old traditions, hoping they'll survive the changes coming. In monasteries and mead halls, tension mounts as England readies itself for a fate no one can predict. In Normandy, armories are readied. Carpenters labour day and night, fashioning ships, sharpening swords. William's resolve hardens into a grim certainty. His claim is a matter of honour and destiny now. His knights vow to follow him across the sea. Priests bless their cause, stirring hopes of conquest with sacred promise. Every wave and gust of wind is watched weather, and fortune must be on their side for the coming invasion. Far to the north, Harald Hardrada rallies Viking jarls and battle-scarred warriors. Saga singers recall promises and old treaties, justifying Hardrada's claim with tales of past glories. Shining axes and war banners are readied as the Norsemen dream of new kingdoms. Across the cold seas, Hardrada's fleet sets its course for England, drawn not only by ambition, but by the lingering notion that fate itself calls them to these shores. Anglo-Saxon England braces for impact. Villages along the coast train militia, eyes scanning the horizon for foreign ships. Local earls strengthen fortifications, while priests urge faith and penance. Peasants talk of strange dreams, beasts acting oddly, and the ominous comet blazing overhead. To many, these are not mere coincidences, but warnings from above, portents of suffering and upheaval that only now begin to unfold in grim detail. Within Westminster, memories of Edward's piety bring little peace. The Confessor's reputation for holiness lingers, but so does regret. Why did he not ensure a clear succession? Whispers echo through the abbey shadowed halls, where monks debate destiny and blame. Some pray for peace, others for deliverance from foreign invaders. At the heart of it, uncertainty gnaws at every hope, and the sense of approaching doom settles deeper into England's soul. Harold's rule is marked by sleepless nights and urgent councils. Trusted allies remind him that England's fate may hinge on a single battle, yet every messenger brings rumours of Norman fleets and Norse warbands. Each message is a spark to the growing fire of anxiety. Harold rides from shire to shire, rallying defenders and promising protection. In his heart he knows that the crown has brought not just power but a deadly burden of responsibility. On the Normandy coast, William's call to arms rallies lords and common soldiers alike. Amid the clangor of forges and the prayers of bishops, William's vision takes shape: a kingdom promised, a destiny to seize. Ships are loaded with horses and supplies, banners painted with coats of arms. The whole of Normandy readies itself, the hope and tension so raw it fills every dawn with meaning. Soon their fate in England's will be decided upon blood and earth. The Norsemen, fearless and determined, cross the wild seas. Their sails billow with icy wind as raven banners soar overhead. Songs of ancient victories echo beneath the clouds. Each rowing stroke draws Hardrada closer to England's shore. For those aboard, this is not just conquest, it is a fateful quest, an echo of glorious sagas. As they near the English coast, the tension on each ship thickens, and the shadow of rivalry deepens in the mist. Omens appear in every corner of the land. In the marketplaces, travellers speak of flocks behaving strangely and storms brewing out of season. A night owl's cry is weighed for hidden meaning. Many believe the fiery comet overhead, Halley's comet, as it will later be known, heralds disaster. The wise and the fearful alike gaze upward, feeling the weight of destiny pressing upon every village, church and field in these anxious, turbulent days. In hidden chambers, Harold's advisers debate desperate measures. Should envoys be sent to William or Hardrada seeking peace? Should England brace for war on two fronts? Tensions mount with every passing hour. Some urge bold attacks, others plead caution. Through it all, Harold remains steady, resolved to defend the kingdom at any cost. The arguments echo long into the night, evidence of a kingdom in the grip of unprecedented uncertainty. Throughout the countryside, the people wait. Farmers fortify their houses, blacksmiths make weapons late into the night. In flickering firelight, families huddle and wonder whose rule will soon shape their lives. Songs are sung of saints, prayers whispered for deliverance. Each sunrise brings new remorser. Norman fleet spotted, a Norse warband landed. The horizon grows darker as the shadow of battle stretches further across the land's weary heart. As summer gives way to autumn, tempers fray. Messengers ride day and night along muddy roads. The folk of England are restless, plagued by dreams of war and loss. In churches, candles burn for the dead King Edward, but also for peace. Through misty woods and over windswept hills, the sound of marching boots grows louder. The entire land seems to shiver in anticipation, awaiting whatever fate the next dawn may bring. On the eve of battle, a deep silence falls. Harold and his closest warriors kneel in prayer, seeking courage. Far from their home shores, Norman and Norse leaders do likewise, hoping for victory. Everywhere, anticipation runs cold as steel. The threads of destiny draw taut, tangible as the frost clinging to banners. The moment before the storm is thick with meaning, and the world holds its breath as England's fate hangs in the balance. In remote monasteries, scribes carefully record the omens and rumours. The comet's fiery trail, dreams of blood, quarrels between noble soul preserved for future generations to ponder. The chroniclers sense history stirring around them, but also the deep uncertainty of men who face a turning point. Their ink flows with both fear and awe, each word heavy, knowing that all will soon change upon the field of battle and in the marrow of England itself. The tide of fate now advances with unstoppable force. Armies march, drums beat, armour is buckled on in frosty dawns. Each claimant English, Norman, Norse believes the gods or God are on their side. Lines are drawn and hopes are kindled or dashed. For Harold, William and Hardrada, each morning brings them closer to a reckoning and to the legacy they will carve in the chronicles of centuries to come. With every step, the sense of ending and beginning grows. The old order, built over generations, stands on the brink. Edward's sanctity and sorrowful indecision linger in memory, but now force and fate speak louder than prayers. In quiet moments, England's people listen to the wind, wondering whose flag will soon rise over their towns. Destiny's grip feels all-consuming, and the hour of decision approaches, unstoppable and relentless. As dawn breaks, armies finally draw near Harold at Hastings, William's fleet landing, Hardrada's Norsemen close behind. The countryside trembles beneath marching feet and the clashing hopes of rival kings. The chapters of the Old England close as a new one waits to be written in blood and courage. The fate of a kingdom hangs by a thread, entwined in omens, ambition, and the tide of history that no man can outrun. Chapter 10. Sainthood, Legacy, and the Shadow of Hastings. As the years pass, Edward the Confessor's name echoes beyond the stone cloisters and shadowy halls of his time. After his quiet death, England would never be the same. Norman banners soon rise above a conquered land, but Edward's memory remains, not as a warrior or conqueror, but as a saint. What does it mean, then, to leave behind holiness where power once ruled? Though the Normans claimed England, Edward's presence lingers in the chapels and hearts of the English people. Revered as a holy king, he is canonized by the Church, his gentle righteousness now sacred legend. Yet a bittersweet question hums beneath the hymns. What good is saintliness when so much is lost? Holiness and defeat entwine, casting a long shadow after Hastings. History finds strange ways to honor those left behind. Edward's canonization becomes more than a religious event. It marks a yearning for lost certainties in a world upended. Pilgrims kneel before his tomb in Westminster Abbey, clutching tales of miracles and memories of old England. Here, the legacy of a gentle king becomes a balm for those remembering what once was. Sainthood comforts as the old kingdom fades into legend, replaced by Norman laws, language, and lords. As Norman kings hold court, the English people find hope in Edward's sanctity. His piety, once seen as weakness, now stands for quiet strength. In stories whispered by firelight, Edward becomes a healing king, a symbol of a truer past. Yet the shadow of Hastings never recedes. It lingers as a reminder of how fate's tide can sweep away even the most sacred things, leaving only memoria myth behind. In Westminster's golden cloisters, the tale of Edward the Confessor endures. Norman and Saxon alike kneel before his relics, hoping for intercession, for healing, for answers. In a world altered by conquest, his purity feels unchanging, untouched by worldly ambitions. For many, the Holy King becomes a mirror of their own losses. His sainthood speaks quietly of resilience and of finding light after catastrophe has claimed what you once called home. With every passing generation, Edward's story gathers new meaning. Some remember him for justice, others for miracles rumoured at his tomb. Monks transcribe his life in illuminated pages, giving voice to a vanished age. Though the kingdom he ruled is gone, the legend persists, gentle wisdom standing against a backdrop of violence and upheaval. In sanctity, Edward transcends conquest, becoming a figure larger than any crown or throne lost to time. Holiness and history intertwine, as if competing for pride of place in memory. Edward is mourned as the last peace-bringer before the storms of 1066. Some call him the bridge between worlds, the ancient and the new, the native and the foreign. His legacy is woven deep into English identity, a thread of gentleness in a tapestry frayed by invasion. In canonizing Edward, England found not just a saint, but a symbol of what was lost and longed for. The questions linger like echoes through stone corridors. Was Edward's holiness enough to shelter his people in uncertain times? Did his faith fail him at the edge of fate? As the abbey's candles flicker and monks chant his name, the answers feel elusive. Perhaps sainthood is not about victory, but about endurance, about leaving a mark that outlives both triumph and tragedy, whispering hope through centuries of changing rulers and shifting fortunes. The Norman conquerors, for all their power, could never erase Edward's spiritual presence. He remains the patron saint of kings and hopeful healers, the gentle monarch whose touch was said to cure the sick. In art and in prayer, his image brings solace to a changed nation. As England remakes itself under foreign rule, the memory of Edward's holy nature quietly binds the past to the present, an anchor in turbulent seas of history. Still, the memory of Hastings looms in unbroken silence between each prayer for Edward. His sainthood is a tale of contrast, light and loss, peace and defeat. Those who seek comfort at his shrine also feel the ache of exile from the world he knew. Yet, paradoxically, through this lingering sorrow, Edward's gentle reign becomes cherished all the more. His unworldly goodness, unmoored from earthly success, gives meaning to the story England tells itself. For historians and poets alike, Edward is both legend and loss. In tracing his life, they find the crossroads where faith meets history's unyielding current. How could such piety flourish just before disaster? Was his reign a gentle twilight before eternal night, or a quiet dawn for something new? In St. Edward, they locate the soul of a country, forever shaped by his blessings and by the battles that came after his gentle rule ended. Saints are born from longing as much as virtue, and Edward's sainthood is no exception. England in Norman hands yearned for certainty, for stability, for a sense of continuity amid the chaos. Tales of his miracle, shielding the sick, calming disputes offered more than comfort. They reimagined what it meant to be English. Through Edward, defeated people found hope that their story did not end at Hastings, that the spirit of their land could endure. Faith and fate, inseparable in Edward's legacy, shape the nation's heart. As monasteries rise and fall, as kings come and go, the sanctity of the last Anglo-Saxon king remains a touchstone. Pilgrims light candles, hoping for a sign his spirit still watches over them. His gentle reign, shadowed by Norman conquest, becomes a lesson sometimes the greatest strength is not found in war, but in unwavering conviction during history's darkest turns. Some say Edward's reputation grew brighter because of what was lost. It was the weight of defeat that lent his holiness extra shine, a beacon through Norman reign. In retelling his story, each generation adds new details, the kindly king with a healing touch, the silent ruler who favoured peace. Through every retelling, Edward's image evolves, comforting those who look back to a gentler era, even as centuries rush forward in constant change. The relics of Edward's lifeless ring, his crown, his stories become treasured heirlooms. Kings kneel at his shrine, hoping to inherit a fraction of his grace. Each relic holds a memory of old customs, of prayers said for guidance in stormy times, of the unity that once bound England. To the people, these objects hold power, not just of miracle, but of belonging. Through them, Edward's sanctity becomes a living heritage, passed through the ages. Yet Edward's story is fundamentally marked by paradox. The very gentleness that won him sainthood could not defend his throne. In the shadow of Norman might, his reign becomes a memory of what might have been a thread of quiet in a world suddenly loud with conquest. Did history reward him with reverence that power denied? The answers, like so much about Edward, resist certainty, lingering quietly in the abbey's echoing halls and sacred silence. Canonization transformed Edward into an in-between figure, at once a man of flesh and spirit, of legend and loss. His gentle piety became both sanctuary and longing. For those facing the new world after Hastings, Edward's sainthood offered reassurance, a promise that moral strength might outlast material defeat. Long after crowns change hands, his memory weaves through English hearts, gentle and persistent, like the distant toll of abbey bells at dusk. Stories of miracles attributed to Edward spread, keeping his name alive even as the Norman language and customs shaped daily life. The sick and suffering visit his tomb, drawn by faith in a kindness that stands untouched by politics. In this way, the Confessor's true legacy outlasts kingdoms. He becomes less a ruler and more a spiritual presence, quietly blessing a people caught between vanished traditions and uncertain futures, a silent guardian across the ages, a silent guardian across the ages. Even the Norman rulers, wary of native uprisings, recognize Edward's influence. Some adopt his image, blending the old with the new to calm tensions. It is a subtle concession, ultimate power rests with the conqueror, but spiritual authority lingers with the saint. Through murals and legends, Edward's gentle reign lives on, a rare accord between the memory of the conquered and the rule of the conqueror, an uneasy peace shaped by myth and memory. As centuries pass, England's relationship with Edward deepens. Monarchs invoke his example, yearning for legitimacy and the love of their people. The gentle king who never fought a great war becomes the standard of righteousness against which all others are measured. With each coronation and national crisis, his spirit is called forth not for conquest, but for healing unity. In the shadow of Hastings, Edward's memory quietly guides the soul of England forward. For the common people, Edward becomes a story told around hearths on dark nights. His tenderness and quiet faith are celebrated in simple songs and whispered prayers. The legend outgrows the man, offering solace to those who feel powerless in the face of sudden change. Edward's spirit gives strength, encouraging generations to find meaning not just in victory, but in kindness and courage, reminders that history's tides turn, but goodness must always endure. Thus, Edward the Confessor's life closes not with triumph, but with a kind of peace. His sainthood does not erase the loss of his kingdom, nor the suffering Hastings brings. Yet his legacy weaves a thread of hope through English history, a reminder that faith can outlast even the sharpest sword. Standing in the silent abbey, we sense that true power may dwell not in crowns or armies, but in the hearts and memories of those left behind. Centuries after his passing, the legend of Edward the Confessor continues to inspire. For some, he is a figure of prayer, for others, a symbol of what endures after chaos. The shadow of Hastings still falls across his legacy, yet his gentle sanctity stands tall. In exploring his sainthood, we glimpse the strange alchemy of defeat and hope-proof that in remembering those who lost, we hold close what truly matters in the story of a nation. As our journey into Edward's life draws to a close, we face the lingering echoes of his story. The gentle king lost his throne, but gained a place in the sacred and sorrowful heart of England. In canonizing Edward, history found both solace and a lens for understanding loss. His reign teaches that holiness may fade from thrones, but it endures in memory, guiding future generations through the shadows left by fate's unyielding hand.